get it ready. How did it? That's just like things that really crazy. Welcome back to my group. I have to think I feel bad.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome, everybody. So, as many of you know, the Society of Asian Academic Surgeons, SAS, has created a visiting professorship program in partnership with multiple host institutions across the country, including the University of Virginia. So the SAS visiting professorships are open for SAS active members or faculty at the assistant or associate professor and are within their first 10 years of faculty appointment. And as you know, Dr. Sung and I are both past presidents of SAS. Today's visiting professorship is jointly sponsored by our Department of Surgery and SAS. And within SAS, each of these lectureships is supported by the generous donations of our members. So today's lectureship is actually named lectureship based on an endowment provided by Dr. Sung. So this is the Peinan and Lita Sung visiting professorships and named after his parents. So it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Samir Gadepalli. So Dr. Gadepalli is the Daniel Teitelbaum Collegiate Professor and tenured Associate Professor in the Section of Pediatric Surgery at the University of Michigan. He serves as the Director of their Pediatric Surgery Fellowship Program and Surgical Director of the Pediatric Surgery Inflammatory Bowel Disease Program. He completed his undergraduate studies at Rensselaer Polytech and medical school at Albany Medical College, and then general surgery residency at the Morristown Memorial Hospital, before pursuing fellowships in surgical critical care and then pediatric surgery at the University of Michigan. His clinical practice spans the breadth of pediatric surgery with special expertise in neonatal and critical care, ECMO, as well as complex GI and hepatobiliary surgery. As a surgeon scientist, he's MPI on 2 major extramural awards, an AHRQ funded study on the standardization of care for pediatric perianal Crohn's disease, which has a nice acronym, the CTON study, we'll tell you about, and a Chan Zuckerberg Initiative Award investigating adipose tissue diversity in infants and children. So Dr. Gadepalli has received numerous teaching awards and has been a commended mentor to the next generation of pediatric surgeons and really exemplifies the principles of team-based science. So on a personal note, I've known Samir for 18 years from when we went through the pediatric surgery match together. And it's an honor to welcome him today as our SAS visiting professor. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gadepalli, who will present today's lecture on team science and pediatric surgery. Dr. Gadepalli.
All right, thanks for having me. Thanks UVA Surgery for hosting me. Thanks to the Sung family, to Alan Sung and Department of Surgery, as well as thanks to Dr. Gossain and the pediatric surgery team for hosting me. This is a really exciting opportunity for me to meet and get viewpoints from different people. So I'm going to present on team science and ped surgery, and I'm going to talk about the lessons I've learned as a sidekick more than a superhero. Disclosures, these are the various funding, and when they come up in the presentation, I'll point out what funding sources are from. They're all public source of funding. If you guys want to fund me, I'm more than happy to take any donations. Objectives, we're going to talk about creating research teams with clinicians, patients and families, and trainees. And in order to do that, I'm going to go through 3 different kind of milestones. One is acknowledge that the classic paradigm of how we think of science is not how it's done anymore, where, I don't know, I think I always had this picture of like somebody wearing a lab coat in like this dark room doing experiments and like, almost like Igor and Frankenstein kind of thing. But like, it's just not how it works. It's a complementary partnership of different skill sets that kind of work together. And so it really is team science, no matter where and how you do it, whether it's bench work, translational, health services, you name it. There's many ways to be successful as an academic surgeon, and the roles take and change as you go down your career. And I'll kind of point out different sidekick roles I've taken on. And then finally, I'll talk about how to train and promote the next generation of pediatric surgeons, especially in this like globally connected, technologically driven social media world that we all live in. And I'll kind of highlight what, studies I've done on ped surgery and the match and contributions I've had. So the story actually starts with what's called the Midwest Ped Surgery Consortium. And I finished my training in ped surgery at Michigan, and they wanted to hire me to do academic surgery and focus on outcomes research. I don't really know what that was, and they said, well, we have like national leaders in this. You should go spend time with them. And it was like John Berkmeyer and Justin Dimick. And so this is about 15, 17 years ago. And as soon as I got done with my fellowship, I did 1 year's worth of like studying underneath them, learning how to do health services research. And then I realized that like, I can't do any research on Medicare beneficiaries for like ped surgery. It just doesn't work. Justin Dimick sat down with me one day and he's like, listen, the first thing I do on my grants is go greater than the age of 18. And so completely excluding your patients. And so it becomes really challenging for me to like do this surgery. So one day we're sitting at our national meeting, the American Pediatric Surgery Association, and complaining and whining about like, hey, I don't have data sets. I don't have a way to study this. How do you expect me to do outcomes research and so forth? And as I was complaining and whining to my boss, there were two other people in the tables next to me, Tom Sato from Milwaukee Children's and Dan Von Allman from Cincinnati Children's. And they're like, dude, our junior people, our outcomes people are complaining about the same thing you're complaining about. And so we said, how about this? Let's invite a bunch of people locally from the Midwest, come together to Ann Arbor in the fall. It's a great place to be. You can watch a football game, and let's talk about like how to do outcomes research. Bring someone who can pay the bills and bring someone who's going to do the work. And so you can imagine which one I was. And we invited a group together, and these are all the people that showed up at that first meeting from the different locations. And we literally called each of them, and we were like, hey, by the way, Cincinnati's coming. And then like Louisville's like, oh, count us in. So there was a lot of FOMO associated. They didn't want to be left out. And so they all just kind of said, okay, we'll come in. And then there were only like a handful that we were like, okay, we definitely need these people because they're really good at this stuff. And like pretty much everyone else were like, hey, just come up with some ideas and then we'll talk about it. That has since led to like numerous publications. It took several years before it actually started to have impact, but then tons of funding associated with it, mainly related to CORI. But more importantly, that collaborative, this was the initial number of people that showed up, has led to collaboratives that then developed even further, where Dan Osley, who was at Madison, Wisconsin, went to Arizona and then started the Western Consortium. And then the Ped Surgery Oncology Research Collaborative was started off of the work that we did in terms of like smart IRBs and doing data sharing agreements between the different institutions. And that came from like Erica Newman working with someone in Cincinnati. And then Sean Kunisaki, when he went to Hopkins, started the Eastern Pediatric Surgery Network. So all of these collaboratives developed off of this Midwest Consortium. And in fact, the people from the first meeting, like all of the ones with stars have become like leaders in the field of ped surgery, either like program directors, chairs, division chiefs, so forth. These are all the areas of research that we've covered since then. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about why was it successful. And one of the stories that comes to mind is from this book, Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Lee Fevin. And they talk about how they actually have a second book called like Leadership Dichotomy or something like that. I like this one better. So it talks about how like Navy SEALs have this thing where they take these boats on Hell Week and they have to like go out into the water, do all of this like obstacle courses and stuff, and then they measure to see which teams come back. And it turns out that like boat crew 2 and boat crew 6, 2 kept coming in first place and 6 kept coming in last place, and they couldn't figure out why. And they were like, "What's going on? Like, what is it? A leadership thing?" And so they said, "Okay, let's take the leader from boat crew 2, who keeps coming in first place, and put him on 6, and take the leader from boat crew 6, who keeps coming in last place, and put him on 2, and let's see what happens." And what they found was all of a sudden, boat crew 6, which was in last place, just from the transition leader, started coming in first place. So this was the leader for our Pete Surgery, Midwest Pete Surgery Consortium, Von Herschel. And this is the goofiest picture I can find of him. But like, that's a huge reason why it's successful. But what was really interesting is that boat crew 6 came in first place with a new leader, but the crappy leader from 6 was moved to 2, came in second place pretty consistently at this point. So despite the fact that they lost the leader, like the boat crew did just fine and was just as successful as they were previously. So what that means is like, we keep losing track of the sidekicks, but the sidekicks are just as important as that leader. And so I was the sidekick on this mission. And there's this story about Sam Gamgee. You guys know Sam Gamgee? So this is from the Lord of the Rings trilogy, where Sam, so the main character is Frodo. Frodo is the guy in front. And Frodo has to like take this ring and drop it in the volcano to like get rid of the ring that rules them all. And Sam Gamgee is there throughout the whole process, serves as like the practical support, handles like food, navigation, serves as like an emotional anchor, like, you know, unwavering loyalty, always like there for Frodo. In fact, literally carries him up the mountain for part of the ride. And it helps in the decision making. Many times Frodo wants to quit, and it's like, no, we got to keep going, got to keep doing it. So I happen to be Sam Gamgee in this one, and this on the left is the group of people I interviewed with the second time I went through the Peace Surgery match, and they were all my interview trainee people at the same time, and they all happen to be in the Midwest, and even were in the Chicago programs, and so it allowed me to generate this camaraderie where I could be the dumb person in the back, ask the questions, and like challenge the thought of the leader that was there. And so other people did it, you know, so it changed from a monarchy to like more of a democracy where everyone felt comfortable. They're like, if this idiot can ask questions, like we can ask questions. And it just led to a lot more nuance in terms of that team structure. And that's an important concept. So this is Ed Catmull talking about how Pixar is developed. So he's the head of Pixar, and he talks about getting the right people and the right chemistry is more important than getting the right idea. And so the number one thing for teams, like in many different studies, many different studies that have been published on teams, is getting the structure, getting the people. That people concept is like the most important thing. And when we talk about people, the leader is super important, but the sidekicks are just as important. The sidekicks lead to the creativity and the camaraderie, but that also helped me develop the network. It helped me understand peer mentors and go, oh, how do I get published? How do I write a paper? How do I get a grant? What should I be doing next in my career? And that was supremely useful. You got to network with the leaders at the various institutions, but you also got a chance to like interact with your peers at these same institutions and go, what are you doing? What has been helpful to you? We'll also look at, in terms of the function of the team itself, how do we avoid the dysfunctions of the team? This is a good book. Lencioni talks about dysfunctions of the team. I'm going to go back and forth for a second. This was our first landmark study that we started on day one of the Midwest Consortium. It took us 10 years to publish it, but basically looks at non-operative management of appendicitis. And each month we would present this data table to look at all of the different centers that were involved and how their recruitment was going, who was eligible, who was being approached, who was actually getting enrolled. And if you go back to this, did we pay attention to the results? Yes, they're right there. Did we look at accountability for each of the different institutions? Yes, every single institution knew what was happening in every other institution. It's like, hey, how did you get your enrollment up? What are you guys doing? How did you, why are you not approaching enough? So on and so forth. Did we go through and have commitment? Yes, you can see on that table who was committed, who was not. Do we have any fear of conflict? Absolutely not. People yelled at each other all the time because they were like, you're not getting enough patients. We need to do this. Well, you're not providing funding, so on and so forth. And then absence of trust. If they didn't trust me, I wouldn't be able to show this slide in a national audience like this. So I think we basically did this without even realizing we were doing it, but it led to this trust and it led to that team, which then leads to like future studies and future productivity. This study was eventually published in JAMA in 2020, looking at non-operative management and differences. It was actually a patient choice study, which was different than like a randomized option. It was more practically done. This was funded by Corey. And what was interesting is that people were deciding not necessarily based on medical reasons for the appendicitis, but more like, hey, my daughter has a soccer game. Oh, my son has gymnastics, whatever. Like those reasons played more of a role in that decision than like the medical reasons. So it's probably not a bad thing. So sidekick number one, Samwise Gamgee, lessons learned, build your support network, accept help with logistics, cultivate emotional support, recognize interdependence of the team. The next sidekick I want to talk about is actually Obi-Wan Kenobi, pictured here with the blue lightsaber here. He dies at the very beginning. Spoiler if you guys haven't seen Star Wars. He dies at the relatively beginning of the movie. And he is the mentor for Luke Skywalker. He reveals Luke his hidden potential to be like a Jedi, gives him some foundational training, but also guides him in critical moments after his death. Like he still comes back. I don't know how, but it's just a force. And then balance support with independence. Let guides Luke in finding their own solutions, but also connects Luke to a larger purpose and a larger mission. So there's this disease entity in neonates called necrotizing enterocolitis. One of the most devastating kind of like childhood diseases. Baby dies of neck every single day in the US. So one baby died today, one baby dies tomorrow, one baby died yesterday. So really bad disease. This is Michael Canmaster, baby that died. This is public information. You can look it up on the internet, so it's not like your book. I was his surgeon. So I was the fellow when he developed neck. He was a twin. His brother, Zachary, also developed neck. And he needed surgery. Zach didn't. Zach got better with medical therapy. Micah got sick. I operated on him twice. Ended up with short gut, ended up with renal failure, eventually survived to like a year of life, and then passed away from sepsis, multi-organ failure. And after his death, they had what's called a life celebration event. And this is me with his mom and his twin brother. And his mom was like, listen, like, I didn't really enjoy this experience. Like, I felt like blindsided by the disease. I wasn't told about it. I never felt like a partner in his care. It was just a lot of like, you do this and we do this. And I just felt like I'm an educated person. And her husband is a urology resident that rotated with her. So we knew him before we knew her. And she's like, and I had trouble with this. Like, and I went to see if there's resources on the internet and I really couldn't find any. There's no like society that talks about this. And yet it's like such a devastating disease. Like babies die from this. Like this is a big deal. Like, why does nothing exist? And so she started this Facebook group and like, she's like, listen, I have like hundreds of people like coming and talking to me. Now it's like tens of thousands. But like, so I was like, well, maybe we can just study the Facebook group and see if like it's to everyone else. And I'm a young junior level faculty and I was like, let's try it and partner with her. And I'm not a very good writer. So I'm ESL. I grew up in India, like English actually my third language, so ETL, I guess. But like, I'm not a very good writer. I don't know how to write papers and all this stuff. But she does. She like works for ecology, and then she connected me to this person, Sheila Gephardt, who's in like Arizona and is like a PhD and does like qualitative research. And so she helped me like create the survey, and then we sent it out to like Facebook groups, got all these parents to talk about like how it worked. And then she connected me with Jay Kim, who was at the time neonatologist in San Diego, now the head of neonatology at Cincinnati Children's. And we kind of did this paper. This paper, like, I don't know, went viral because it went on Facebook. She just literally put it on there. So I partnered with the mom is the second author on the paper. And then I've published with many a parent, by the way, like they're like phenomenal writers. So I literally send them my piece of crap, they edit it, and it looks awesome afterward. And they can also like be really good disseminators of your research. So like all of these people now contact me. They're like, oh, it seems like you're the expertise for like omphalocele. I'm like, no, I don't know where'd you get that. And they're like, oh, this mom told me on Facebook. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a good way to like figure out who's the expert. But it's like remarkable how strong these parent communities and patient communities are. And so, and they're really smart. And so they were the catalyst for me. And they served as my sidekicks and I served as theirs. And it was really helpful to like get this paper out. And then it got taken up by a bunch of neonatologists and so forth. So then we ran into all of these people from the ped surgery world and neonatology world who was like, we should get together. And I said, okay. I was like, I don't know exactly how to host the symposium. And so Jen is from UC Davis in Sacramento. And so that's where her whole family lives and stuff. So we talked to the neonatologist there who said, yeah, I'm happy to like help host the symposium. So in 2017, we had the first NEC symposium and we hosted at UC Davis, which is her home and family. And then all of the proceeds from there got published in the Seminars of Ped Surgery. And that's Dan Osley, the person that was in my Midwest consortium. So that's how that connection came about. And one of the articles in there was about doing a biorepository. That was my idea. Matt Rawls was my fellow at the time, so I put him as first author because he was going to stay as faculty. Carl Sylvester is like a ped surgeon in Stanford, and Misty Good is a neonatologist, was at St. Louis, now is the head of neonatology at UNC. And this got picked up by the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation, and they funded it for like this national repository. Michigan's not even a site. I'm from Michigan. And this led to like all of this funding in this biorepository. I don't do basic science research, but like basically we just collect samples, and that samples can be used by anyone in these consortia to their studies. So instead of like their 10 or 12 patients that they have with neck, now they have 120 patients with neck that they can like do the same research on. So just to kind of like serve as like a catalyst for that action. And what I learned is like NEC is a patient disease, but it's really a family disease. Like patient doesn't really care, like they're a baby, they don't really understand any different, but like the families care, and it's like a huge impact on the families. And we're like, how can we how can we empower these families more? And like one of the moms was like, listen, I was in this study with Cincinnati between glutamine versus placebo for my kid, and I had to collect stool samples and bring it into the hospital. She's like, I'll happily do it if it helps with research. But she's like, I don't even know which arm we were on, and I don't know what the results of the study were. And I was like, dude, I just have to pick up poop from the diaper every month and like bring it in Cincinnati. And it's like literally a pain in the ass. And so she was like, this is not okay. Like, I would love to partner on this research. Like, I can help on this research. Like, why am I just picking up poop for you? Like, you can tell me at the end what happened. And so, and then another mom was like, you prescribe TPN, right? I was like, yeah. And then she's like, do you know the sound of the alarm it makes at like 2 a.m. when the lights are off and you don't want your baby up, but like you got to check on that alarm because you don't know if like the life-sustaining medications that you're giving through TPN are actually being absorbed or given? And I was like, I have no idea. And she's like, exactly. You have no idea. She's like, you prescribe all this stuff. You don't know how insurances work for formulas. You have no idea how TPN works outside of the home. Like, she's like, you got to partner with us. Like, there's no way you can do all of this research that is like actually impacting patients' families without having that partner. And I was like, you're freaking right. And so the first symposium was run by clinicians. And we said, what if we just flipped it on its head and we created another symposium, but this time we did it with the parents as the leaders and clinicians as sidekicks. And so this time I was a little bit further in my career, and I was like, I'm going to host this one in Ann Arbor. So we had the 2019 symposium. So people pictured in this slide are, so I'm somewhere on that left side, and then Sheila Gephardt's on this slide, Jen Canmaster's on this slide, Jay Kim from the initial publications on this slide, Misty Good is on this slide. There's like head of ped surgery at like various different institutions on the slide. And basically, I just had all of them come over to Ann Arbor, and we said, let's talk about ways to improve this. And basically, that's a quote from the meeting. I may not remember all the great science discussed at the meeting, but I'll always remember all the patient family stories. And I remember how the meeting made me feel, and that will make me a better provider. there was not a dry eye left in that building. And I was very happy because I'm a sympathetic crier, so I wasn't the only one. Every single session was like dedicated to a child or a family member, and those are all like pictures of like kids that are like hung up on the main poster wall. Every time the presenter spoke, we would have the parents ask the first questions. We would have them on the booth sitting alongside of them. This is David Hackham from Hopkins giving the talk in Ann Arbor. We said, let's just beat up this hierarchy. We had a parent member sitting at every single one. We had these cups with like pictures of the children on each of the things. So like it was very centered with the patients and families in mind. This is Diana Bianchi, head of the NICHD, came and talked. This was funded by PCORI as well as NICHD. So we had representative from the FDA, PCORI, NICHD, and like literally we just called them out and be like, dude, you're not funding us enough. And it was like unbelievable where you can have these battles with families talking to the funders. And then I'm like, yeah, I'd like to get funded, like help me out. And then like just directly talk with the leaders in our national funding thing. And like I would call up some of these people and they're like, I'm not really sure, I'm not available. And I'm like, hey, by the way, I have a parent on the line. And then they will start talking and they're like, oh, whoa. And then the whole conversation completely changes. And so they're complementary skill sets that are very useful to align, help make progress. So we call this an all-in meeting. Parents were hosts, parents were speakers, parents were empowered in the audience to speak and ask the first questions. We were like, if you can't come up with a question, we'll tell you a question to ask. And so all of them had something to do. Every session was dedicated to a patient or a family person. The parents were like leaders of small groups, but they also had posters up right side by side next to every scientific poster that we had up. This is what we called an all-in meeting. We said break down the hierarchy, integrate the patient families, prioritize the funds to support them to come in, elevate their voices, make it relevant, personal, and like it is such a catalyst to like get science moving. I'm not going to play the video. Basically, you can look it up on YouTube. We've had every other year since then. 2021 was done virtually. Cincinnati hosted it, and then 23 was in San Diego, and then last week we had one in Chicago. So a sidekick can serve as a catalyst for a hero's actions. So Obi-Wan passed away. For Luke, Micah passed away for the NEC Society. And the lessons I've learned through this were find mentors who see your potential. I met with like everyone from Hackham and Gail Besner, Augustina Piero, like people who were like leaders in the field for NEC research. I actually don't do a lot of like basic science research, and it didn't matter. Value foundational training, things that I was good at was talking to families, and that's all I had to do in this scenario. Seek guidance, not dependence. Like they taught me how to write papers, how to write grants and so forth for this, because I was like, how am I going to fund this? And they're like, we'll help you. And so I would write the grant material. They would help me with like letters and so forth. And so that was a huge role for me in terms of like mentorship. And then connect your personal goals to a larger purpose. It's far more motivating that you know you're doing it for a person. And then it prepares you to be the mentor, where now I can like be the mentor for the next generation of people coming in who have an interest in NEC. So we talked a little bit about complementary partners and skill sets. I'm going to talk very briefly around roles that are taken as you go up the ladder. So this is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak down at the bottom, and then Bill Gates and Paul Allen at the top. They're founders of Apple and Microsoft, and that partnership leads to a lot of productivity. They're sounding boards with each other, come up with ideas and so forth. So that's what my R1 and HRQ was, well, now defunct HRQ, but the funding's still coming, so I don't care where it's coming from. The people on the right are all pediatric surgeons. The people on the left are all GI, and we wanted dyads in this and in all the groups. So if a group didn't have a dyad, couldn't partner with them. And we basically, as you can see, a lot of them are in the Midwest or have a connection to the Midwest. And that's how this got started. And we basically said, we're gonna like have sounding boards in terms of like how do we improve perianal processes, because I have to figure out the medical care and I have to figure out the surgical care in order to like move the field forward. And this is still yet to come. We're still analyzing it. There should be a handful of publications coming out in the next year. Another way to do sidekicks are having what's called a guy in the chair. So a guy in the chair is like when there's a superhero, there's a guy in the chair telling them where the problems occur, and then the superhero goes to like solve them. So like Ned Leeds down at the bottom left is the guy in the chair for Spider-Man, which is Peter Parker in this scenario here. And that's Alfred from Batman movies, and then that's Batman on the top. And basically, I've had a guy in the chair for many of my research. This is at the ASA, the American Surgical Association, where we looked at, we created this, I love mnemonics, as you can see. We created the CHESS group and Child Health Evaluation Service. Basically, we just got anyone who had an interest in health services together within the pediatric community. And I said, hey, I have this idea. Can you guys help me with it? And then they served as the guys in the chair. And it allows me to like learn from them as to how to analyze this. We have the head statistician from the CHA help us with this data. And then this has now led to like several other publications related to health services in using this group. I've also served as like a leadership as part of a large team of superheroes where like you're working with a large collaboration of people, but like my skill sets aren't in research, my skill sets are in team building. And so I just use that as my way of like doing it. And whether it was like getting a group of surgeons at my local community, so I got the orthopedic surgeon, urologist, ENT, like basically everyone, this was like, I don't know, 2016 or something like that. We started it and we said, hey, everyone's trying to like decrease opioids. Can we just get rid of them? And so this was like, we just handed out pain journals to families and we said, let's just stop prescribing it. So like for appendectomy, adenoids, supracondylar fractures, many of the plastic surgery procedures, circumcisions, orchidopexy, all of these, we just eliminated opioids altogether. So like people still call me up and they're like, oh, we would like to randomize the study on like gallbladders and appies for like opioids or decreased opioids. And then we're like, dude, we haven't used opioids since like at least 2019. So it's like, I don't know what you want me to randomize 2 opioids for. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like I can't participate in your study. So there's several people have contacted me about partnering them. Like, it's too late. Like, we stopped using them. I've partnered with like pediatric ECMO people on publishing multidisciplinary like guidelines around various things related to ECMO, triage in the PICU, how to like partner and improve care in pediatric ICUs when they're overwhelmed with like COVID at the time. And basically, it's like a group of radiologists, what study should we order for IBD? What do I do with heterotaxy? And these are like people from all over who have, I don't know, expertise in like lung and heart and so forth. But like, I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to help. And so just basically serving in different roles throughout my academic career as a sidekick. And then finally, how do I get the next generation to understand the skill sets that are necessary to be a team scientist? So one of the problems in academics is that we really focus on authorship as a way to like get promoted, like personalized authors. But like you can't really accomplish that without all the people in between. Like that's like having the boat with just one person rowing it. You need that entire crew to row that boat. Like it doesn't go anywhere with one person. And yet we forget about all the sidekicks and we only care about who was in the first or who was in the end. It's like the most ridiculous thing. We have to change that. Grant funding, like the grant funding goalposts just keep moving. Like it's harder and harder to get funding. What my predecessor or what my mentor was able to do in terms of NIH funding, the competition was just different. It's different now and it's going to be different like 5 years from now. So we have to stop moving these goalposts. The promotion criteria, I feel, are very outdated. I can see this now that I have tenure. The letters exclude teams. So it turned out like one of my letters had somebody that I had published in the ACS bulletin, a paper, and they're like, hey, we Googled this person, we can't use this letter. And I was like, that's the most absurd thing I've ever seen. I was like, they just happened to be some like, that wasn't even a science. Like, it was like a blog. I was like, they're like, yeah, but you already have previous relationship. Like, all right, this is weird. So just all kinds of ways to like exclude people. And what we're doing is perpetuating this solo hero myth when it's like, these heroes have sidekicks. Like every single hero I just pointed out to you has sidekicks. So we need to stop doing that. We need to look at the sidekicks as the heroes. There's all these departmental politics. They're like, oh, you partner with PEDS. Does PEDS have the funding or does surgery have the funding? And it's like, the institution has the funding. Neither of us, I don't get paid anything more for the funding. Like I get the same salary. So it's just, there's all these like nuances and politics around it. And it undervalues mentorship, which is a problem for the long run. Potential solutions are just value teamwork. Teamwork should be a promotion strategy. That's if you're going to build the people that you're like, your rewards are going to create what you want to build. So if you want to build people who value teamwork, value that. Like promote people who are doing it. Credit mentorship and teaching. Look for like narrative CVs as to like why people did what they did and what actually entailed in that CV. Get letters from collaborators. They'll tell you how easy that person's worked with or not. So for PEDS surgery, it starts with the match. So match is like, as many people know, one of the most competitive matches. So one of my first projects was like, so I went through the match approximately a week after my firstborn son was born on the day of the ab site. So as a fourth year resident, and it was painful. And I went through like 30 interviews, something like that. Whatever interviews you get, you have to go as the resident going into PEDS surgery. But that means you're on call whenever you get back. That means you miss all this time. So like this has appeared before virtual interviewing, and now a lot of people are going back to in person. But that's painful. Like, so I barely saw my firstborn child's like first few months of life because I was just traveling on interviews because I had to, and I didn't even match. So I spent $10,000 plus however much, and I did a match, and I like missed like the first few months of my child. So yeah, I am biased around this. So I asked the program directors, how many people do you actually need to interview? And every year it's like, oh yeah, this is the number of people we interviewed. And then I was like, okay, what was your median rank? They were like in the top 5. It didn't really matter like how many interviews they did. They were all matching the top 5. That means everyone is picking something different. If it's the same, if they're all looking for the same thing, then you wouldn't match in the top 5 everywhere. Like you would match all over the place. But people are matching in the top 5 because each of these programs has a specific set of things that they are looking for, that they are interested in. And some people want ABSCII scores. Some people want number of publications. Some people want the value of teamwork and leadership. Like it's different for every organization. And so I was like, how many people do you need to interview? And they all were like, well, probably 30, probably 25, probably 20. And so like the number actually was far lower. So I said, then just interview 20 because that will already save a lot of people's stuff. Like that will prevent you from having to go because you can't control it at the resident level. The resident has to go to every interview that you get. Just if you're already looking for particular things amongst residents, pick those particular things to bring them in. So then how do we do that? So then this is my next project was, so now I'm the PD. This is how we do it here is program coordinator receives applications. I have a randomized based on their ACG AAMC ID, that ERS ID that comes in. I just randomize that. And then I then receive the applications in a random order. And then I then de-identify them and I send them out to 2 different groups of faculty with at least 3 members in each group to review them. And they're independently reviewing half of the stuff for each of the groups. And there's 3 different people interview half of the groups. So then I just take the top 20 using the rubric that I created that I'll show you now. And the rubric accounts for all the things that we value. So literally we asked our group, what do you value? And we just kind of went through it. We weighted those different criteria. And then we said, we're all going to just standardize this rubric. And we presented it and we shared it with the American Pediatric Surgery Training Program directors. And they're like, well, you know, we're still having issues with like, you know, bias and so forth. So they started this DEI group. And so I went, talked to them and they said, well, here's all ways that you can decrease your biases, like use a holistic review, go through the applications, go through what you value, and highlight those things, and then bring those people in. And then when you ask them questions, standardize those questions so it's not like, I mean, I got to ask all kinds of weird questions, like, what are 6 uses for a sewer cap? Like, what the hell does that have to do with me being a ped surgeon? Like, just random crap. And it's like, I think it's because people don't know how to interview. And so they just kind of pick random things. And the interviews are not very good at selecting people anyway. So we actually use our holistic review for 50%. We use standardized interview questions for 20%, and the interview search is 30%. So you can have a horrible day and it doesn't kill you on the like overall rank list. And so then we presented all of our strategies to like mitigate bias. And they were like, well, does that mean that you actually increase your URIs? Are you just seeing like less qualified people now? So then we studied that. And I said, actually, no. It actually turns out that during our holistic review, we actually saw people just if not more qualified. So yes, they had less professional graduate degrees, but their USMLE Step 2 scores were higher, their ABSCII scores were higher, their peer-reviewed publications were more, and all of their other stuff match up the same, and our URIM rate actually increased. So the percentage of people who are underrepresented in medicine were actually more likely to be offered interviews. Then I looked at gender diversity. And so I have 3 daughters, and they don't even see themselves as a potential ped surgeon, which kind of sucks. Like, I shouldn't be that way. And it's because of what you see day to day. And so I looked at all of the different pediatric surgery communities across the country, and we looked at who is sitting on their board, who are their current or past presidents, what is the distribution like in anything that's publicly facing, or like, and these are the orange represents the percent that identifies female in each of these things. Hasn't really gotten better. So people are like, well, it was back then, but it's gotten so much better. It hasn't. It has not changed. It's the same. And so one of the ways to do it is, how do you then let people envision themselves to be a leader in pediatric surgery? So I said, let's make a children's book. So this is my idea, but I was like, I'm not going to write, I don't want to be the first author on a children's book that I'm saying women surgeons are important. And then the male surgeons, I just didn't make any sense to me. But I am represented here by my daughter, who did all the icon art. So this is like the icon art that she draws. And so that's my daughter, Kaylee. She's now a senior in high school. But so all the other authors are pediatric surgeons as part of what's called the Benny Brooks Committee, which is like led by mostly all female pediatric surgeons, I'd say. And then we started this diversity scholars program. It's now called Inclusive Excellence or something like that. But anyway, basically we're like, how do I get people to be interested in pediatric surgery if they never see themselves as a pediatric surgeon? And so we just open it up for people who are in surgical residencies, and we said just apply. And each year we pick that 2 people to just bring to the national meeting, have them meet with people, have them talk to other ped surgeons, have them go around, and then we serve as like mentors for them. This year we had another couple, and basically we formed this long-term relationship with them, give them ideas, and then hopefully they then influence the next generation of people coming in. And studied it to look to see what can be done better, how can we improve that experience. Also looked at the operative experience of pediatric surgeons. So as the number of pediatric surgeons has increased, the board certified pediatric surgeons are in the blue there. The orange represents the ped surgery procedures that each one of them do, goes down. So the number that general surgeons do that are pediatric surgery is even worse. So this is based on when you certify for board certification, you have to like redo your, when you have to like redo your boards, you have to like submit some, how many surgeries that you've done. It's kind of changed now, but like it used to be like every 10 years or so. So it was like this how many surgeries we did over the past year or over the past 2 years. And what we found is like there was like a steady decline in the number of surgeries that are just being done. And then add to that, so this is from our chest group, there's about 13% of children in America that actually turns out in rural populations. And there's no difference in terms of like age, sex, what kind of procedures they have, the different states, whether they have a complex condition, what year, and so forth. What is important is that they're the forgotten group. They're white, they have Medicaid, and they're usually seen at NFL hospitals without pediatrics. And they have to travel a significantly higher amount to be actually seen by pediatric surgeons now, because as the ped surgeons increase, they're all centrally located in different areas. So they have to travel a lot more, they get transferred far more frequently, and it's for things like appendectomy. Like, guarantee you, any adult surgeon in this room can do an appendectomy on a 16-year-old, probably better than I can. So, and probably same for like inguinal hernias. I mean, you guys do far more adolescent hernias than I would. So it just doesn't make sense that they have to travel all this distance to see me in a centralized area. But that's what's happening right now in all of the US. And that's why they're all frustrated. These are the pediatric surgeons, and on the all the way to the right, you can see the percentage of pediatric surgeons that had 0 cases over the past year. So 60% did not do a biliary atresia. 45% did not do any kidney tumor resections. So the kidney tumor that was presented today, 45% of people who were sitting for their boards did not do one over the past year. Like, that's a problem. So we're like, I think we need to start specializing in pediatric surgery. If like you're not doing enough of them, how are you ever going to like bring quality? And so this is what specialization in ped surgery looks like. Most people, the first area of specialization is around oncology. The next one is around ARMs, and chest wall deformities, IBD, so on and so forth. But these are all the subspecialties that are represented within ped surgery. And then we asked about how do we feel about that? All over the place. People who have specializations at their location feel different than people who don't have specialization. But I think the underlying problem is that as ped surgeons, we're not doing enough. So if you're going into ped surgery, you got to subspecialize in something if you want a job. And we looked at very specific stuff around like fetal surgery and what specializations look like. We did it for colorectal, so on and so forth. But the area of specialization that I want to focus on is what about specialization in academic surgery? And if you're not going to let people get grants, that is becoming ever more challenging to get a grant. It actually turns out that these 2 time points are all the APSA surgeons, 2 decades, 1 decade apart, and who got funded, who did not get funded. And the number of APSA members has continued to increase, but the number who got funded really has not. In fact, it's gone down. So it becomes harder and harder to get funding. And in fact, it takes longer. So the time from the fellowship to when they get funded is like 12 years back then. Now it's 14 years. So normal promotions are like 7 years, 10 years. That's when like you talk about promotions. Like, how do you expect anyone to get promoted then if you're waiting for grant funding? And it's mostly the same people that got funded. It wasn't like new people getting funded. Most of the funding increase is actually in our grants, and that's from like previous research productivity, not from like K series down, U series down, F series down. Like, it's not from like the funding is coming from people who already been funded. Look, the differences in funding, where they're from, and so forth. But the bigger question is like, we're going to lose academic pediatric surgeons if we don't address this. We don't address promotions. We don't address what we value. We don't address how people get promoted. And finally, I've looked at like, how do I increase specific skill sets? How do we change the model of like the way we do ped surgery and like learning what is a competent ped surgeon? And how can I figure out a way to like, similar to like the EPA problem that we discussed this morning? It's a pain for me to try to get I've tried everything from like, how do I give a teaching award or like some sort of, a metric to like follow. I've tried like displaying the data for everyone. It's like, if you figure out how to do it, I will steal from you. It's hard. But you can do practice readiness, and we have a practice readiness model where we have these like very specific skill sets that they have to accumulate in order to be independent, so that they can be independent as a surgeon before they finish their fellowship. These are all the people that like are part of our consortium. So like what we do is we actually literally track how many cases they do, and then we have to take a video of their case, and it gets sent to like Hopkins or sent to Indiana, and then they review that video and they decide, yes, this person seems competent after they've had like an oral review, after they've had all of this stuff. So we just literally kind of deem them competent at that point on that case where they can serve as like an attending. This is our promotion in place process map to become like promoted basically as a fellow and serve as like an attending role. Approved by ACGME, but not approved by the American Board of Surgery. So the next generation P surgeons hopefully are diverse, self-specialized, and competent. So milestones, we talked about complementary skill sets in team science, talked about taking on different roles as you go through in terms of like what kind of sidekick you might be, and then talked about training the next generation of PX surgeons. So these are my objectives. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
Questions for Dr. Gadepalli? Okay, good. So one phenomenal talk, and I think really reflective of your decade and a half of diverse contributions to the field. I'm really intrigued about the kind of proposal you put forward about how to think about promotion and tenure differently. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday evening. So it's one thing to be a part of a section or a division and change the culture of that kind of operational unit. Maybe a little bit harder on a department level. How are you approaching making that kind of culture change at the University of Michigan?
Yeah, I think that we like to think that culture stems from the leader, and some part of it does, but the culture actually stems from every single person in the group. So it's, if you're like, man, our culture sucks, you're partially responsible for that culture too. Like, you're in it. Like, you have as much power to influence that culture as anyone else around you. And I think that's something that, we have these learned behaviors of helplessness, and it's like, we have to get rid of that. So if you want to change the culture, every one of us has to change the culture. The culture is represented by each one of us. Like, there's some percentage of it that you contribute to. And so whether it's residents, whether it's faculty, whether it's staff, like, it's the daily, everyday interactions that influence that culture. And so what I've tried to do, like, throughout my time at Michigan, the culture at Michigan has changed dramatically from when I started there to how it is now. And I would like to say I've played a part in that culture because I'm part of it. And it's from like daily interactions. It's from like what we accept or don't accept within the culture, where, there was a time when Peter Ehrlich, love him, great partner, went off in the OR one day where he was like, just chewed people out because he was like, you were not ready, you were not prepared, and then he just went off. And I went in, I talked to him in his office, and I was like, what happened? And then he like told me, he's like, this is what happened, this is what's going on, this is, they were not ready, this is, they should have had this, they didn't do this, and so on and so forth. I was like, that all may be okay, but what you did is also not okay. Like, you also didn't interact properly with the team. Like, that can't be an acceptable solution. Like, we got to do better. Like, and he's like, yeah, right. And I was like, can you go and apologize? Because once you start apologizing, then the behavior gets better on everyone else, because you now empowered everyone else to take on that responsibility. Otherwise, they're going to be relying on you next time for everything to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect if you keep acting like that, because you have to now go and say, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I apologize. And what you do as the hierarchical leader is give away the power, but you never lose all the power. You still have a title. Like, by giving away the power, you now empowered each of those individuals to then take on responsibility, because you're like, hey, I'm sorry, but I think we could have done this better. What do you think we should do? And you just take on more of a coaching mindset. And then it actually unburdens you in many ways within that culture. So like, for me, that's the approach I've taken. I've been a sidekick most of my life, but that approach has allowed me to empower the people around me to take on responsibilities. Like, I have like, I don't know, 160, 170 publications. And it's not because I hit home runs. I punt to first base. Like I steal first base. I'm all about Moneyball in terms of my publications. But the reason why is I've served as a sidekick. I've helped empower other people to take on that responsibility. There's no way I can do that many publications on my own. There's no way I'd have 160 first author. But I can have 160 contributions. Like the reason I'm able to diversify my contributions is I've empowered all the various groups, whether it's other clinicians, patients or families, or trainees, and given them permission to take on that responsibility. And then they pay it back by saying, hey, I have this idea. And it's like, they're like, why don't you take first author on this one? I'm like, sure, sounds great. And so at least 10% of them are going to be first author or last author for me. But like, it's just, it comes back. But I think people lose sight of the sidekicks, and we're such a like hero culture that we're like, oh, you have to be the next Superman or Spider-Man. And it's like, no, you don't. You use what you have as a skill set, what you bring to the table, and just maximize that the best you can.
Sure. Probably a bit of a loaded question, but you alluded to this a little bit in the amount of funded pediatric surgeons there are, which is very small. And you've done an amazing job, by the way. I mean, I get tired just listening to you. It's amazing what you've accomplished. And I loved your approach. But my question is, increasingly, we see it in medical students as well. This escalation, I've got to have publications in order to, get into residency. And, and I kind of pick on peds a lot in the sense that ped surgery, you can't get through the door unless you do 2 years of research. And yet only 2% of the pediatric surgeons out there are funded researchers. So why is it that we have developed a system from the medical student all the way up to all the fellowships where like to get in, you got to kind of commit 2 more years of your life that you may or may not be in your interest?
Yeah, so it has to do with metrics that are easy to compare with each other.
Right.
So people know how to count better than they know how to read. And so what happens is that how do I compare person X to person Y? And you need a metric to do that because you're like deciding who gets the opportunity, because opportunities are inherently inequitable. That's just how opportunities work. And so you're like, if I have to decide between X and Y, you're like, okay, I have, where did they train? What's their med school? What's their residency? Whatever. Where did they train? But those trainings are very much across the board, pretty equivalent. Like everyone who trains here is going to be an awesome surgeon, just like everyone who trained at University of Michigan is going to be an awesome surgeon. So it's like you can use that as a bridge. So then I'm looking at recommendations. Every recommendation is like, oh, this person walks on water, turns water into wine. And I'm like, dude, I'm matching Jesus. Like, every single recommendation is awesome. So I'm like, okay, I can't use that as a metric, compare X and Y. So then you're left with what can I use? And so people go, oh, let me just count the number of publications, and I'll just count the number of publications. And that's how we got into this world, is we don't have better metrics to compare it with. So when I mentor people, I go, help them count what your contribution is in some way. It doesn't have to be publications, but it has to be something measurable that they can use to compare with someone else. So if you're an education scientist, talk to me about all the education frameworks that you've developed, all the lectures that have been created because of you, all the professors that you brought in, whatever. Like if you're an education person, if you're a global person, help me compare what you've done for this, country. Like how did you contribute to the global, threshold? How many people were impacted by the work that you've done? And I think that if you're able to quantify it, then it's so much easier to compare two groups. The reason why research becomes the way to quantify is because you have no other metric to use. So if you have easy metrics to compare people, then it's much easier to go, oh, I have 2 really amazing people, but this person probably deserves this opportunity more because of what they've contributed. So the people who are able to quantify the contributions end up getting that metric.
People talk about, if you want to go fast, you can go it alone. But if you want to go far, you really need a team. Can you just talk about practical aspects of, or lessons that you've learned about doing it together as a team, the challenges of working with all these different people with various
Yeah,
schedules?
I get residents all the time that are like, hey, I want to go into peds surgery. And I'm like, great, work with 2 other residents that are also interested in peds surgery. Because if you publish 5 papers and each of them publishes 5 papers, you now have 15 papers. Like, you will multiply that by getting a lot of people together. You will have complementary skill sets. One person's really good at stats. One person's good at writing. One person's good at data collection, whatever. Like, if a resident comes to me, I'll be like, find 2 other medical students to do the data collection for you, because they'll do it faster than you will, because you'll get distracted on your like retrospective chart review and be like, oh, I wonder what happened to this patient. Med student? No, you're just gonna be like, this is what happened. I'm writing it down in the Excel. Like, they will do it so much faster. And so the absolutely is a true statement. You will go further if we work together, but it has to be complementary skill sets. If it's the same, so this is why group projects when you were in like 6th grade didn't work, because they weren't complementary skill sets. It's the same skill set. So the reason they work now is because they're complementary skill sets. Like, everyone comes in with something different that they bring to the table. So that's why the teamwork works later on. It doesn't work when you're in 6th grade when all of you guys are the same. Like, you're like, what role do we take on? We're all supposed to do this. So one person ends up doing the project and everyone else gets the credit. Like, that's not how it would work now, because like it has to be complementary. It has to be something that's interlocked. So there's this really good book by Scott Page that talks about the diversity bonus, and he talks about cognitive diversity. And he's like, this day and age, the way we work is like, you know, it's a thinking field. Like, it's not a labor field where it's manual labor that we're doing. And so if you take somebody who's A and has some skills, and you take someone who's B and has the same skills, adding them together does not actually produce more. What happens is, if C, even though they have less skills, has different skills than A or B, they're a better partner for A or B, because you now have complementary skill sets. So that's what you're really looking for, is like you're partnering with team members that don't have the exact same background as you do. And that's become easier and easier to do based on how your residencies already align.
I know that before you have to do a lot of reporting in regards to how you're actually involving the patients or the stakeholders, like the parents in this case.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about like the practicality, like what you actually did in terms of involving them, but also what you did in terms of educating them in terms of what the research was that you were doing?
Yeah.
Like what that looked like.
Yeah, you do it every day as a clinician. So you are interpreting what the patient or family says, and you're translating it into medicalese, and then you're translating your medicalese back to the patient. So if you're talking to them about like, hey, we're gonna take out this appendix, you're going, okay, the appendix is located between your small intestine and your large intestine. We're gonna put like a small camera in your belly button. We're gonna take a look and identify if it's like has a hole in it or doesn't have a hole in it. That's natural language. That's not, I didn't say the word perforation. I didn't say like inflammation. I didn't say, you know, like the appendix is the only medical word I use in there. And so you're doing it already as a clinician every single day when you talk to patients and families. You just have to do it from a research standpoint. And so you're like, hey, what is the thing that bothers you the most? Just ask them. They will give you a list. And then you take that list and you're like, hey, Picori, this is what the families tell me is really bothersome to them. This is what I would like to do to fix it. And then you talk to the family and say, hey, if I do this, do you think that would fix the problem? They'll say, yeah, it sounds like it. And they're more than happy to partner with you. There was a patient's family that like, so we had a data breach where like one of my residents lost his laptop. So we had to report to people that we lost data. And so I had to like email all these people, and they're like, can you send me what you lost? And so I sent them their information. They're like, actually, your data is wrong. Like we actually were seen in another hospital. This is what they found, and so on and so forth. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. Thank you. And they're like, actually, and I know you've taken care of 2 more people with the same disease at your hospital. It probably didn't show up on your database because they were billed for this or this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I found those 2 other people. And then all of these 4 moms then came up to me, and then we like actually had a much better paper out of it. And then some guy down in like Alabama or Atlanta called me, and they're like, hey, it seems like you're very good at like these highlight societies. And I was like, no, I'm not. I just happen to partner with these family members. But like families absolutely love to hear the translation. You just have to translate medical language to them, which you do all the time anyway as a clinician.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gadepalli. That was a fantastic talk. Great for you. All right, thank you.
couple more things.